My guests this week are Faisal Saeed Al Mutar and Melissa Chen. They work together at the Global Secular Humanist Movement, a platform committed to the use of critical reason, factual evidence, and scientific methods of inquiry rather than faith and mysticism in seeking solutions to human problems and answers to important human questions. That was a serious intro. You guys write a nice boilerplate there, I gotta tell you.
Well, I tried my best.
You gave me those are all the buzzwords that we talk about all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the word committed is the most important one.
Committed?
Yeah.
Committed
to these principles, because it's very hard to be consistent these days.
It is hard to be consistent.
Especially, as you know, with some of the folks we consider our allies, but they have their mind on Christianity, but on other stuff they change their mind. So
yeah,
the word committed here I think is the most important one.
Right. So you're itching to get right into it, get into our.
I want to get into a fight, but
into our.
That's the reason I flew all the way from New York. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about our friends.
Of course.
Left, of course. Faisal, you've been on the show before.
I have. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me again.
Yeah, my pleasure. So you guys work together, and
yes.
I want to do a little bit just on your histories first. So since we've had Faisal here, let's start with you, Melissa. So you are originally from Singapore.
Yes, I was
born.
born
here.
I moved here in 2004 for college. Worked and then went to grad school and continue working. I love it, and I got sold the American dream and the American ideals. I think in part it's the same thing that drew both of us here. We couldn't have more different backgrounds. Faisal grew up under a dictatorship in Baghdad, and he has only known war and strife his whole life, but I've had an interesting parallel childhood in Singapore where it's a benevolent dictatorship. So, he grew up under those circumstances, but it was safe and very prosperous, city, and life there is stable.
Yeah, so I think that people, at least in America, I'm trying to expand some worldly knowledge on people, but I feel like people don't really know anything about Singapore. So when you say a benevolent dictatorship, what does that even mean?
Well, it's been a single-party state since 1965. One party has ruled the country since that time, ever since it's gained independence, and they are, economic freedoms are extremely well developed in Singapore. I think Heritage Foundation listed as 2 out of 180 on their Economic Freedom Index.
Right.
But if you look at political freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, it's virtually non-existent.
Right. So basically there's freedom to sort of pursue the work that you want, but not necessarily say the things that you want to say.
It is a neoliberal contradiction in that regard, because it's extremely fiscally austere. Low taxes, free trade, deregulation, it's all the buzzwords that the right-wing economists love.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think it's sort of throwing a wrench into Milton Friedman's capitalism and freedom, his theory about, he said that economic freedom was a necessary precondition to political freedom and civil freedoms, and that's not really happening.
Right, so that's really interesting. So Singapore sort of got half of it right, because you have the economic part, but not the social part and the political part.
Right.
Now, of course, you come from Iraq.
Both of them are wrong in my country. We got everything wrong over there.
So she got 1 for 2, and you got 0 for 2. But a little bit has to do with some of the things that we did here in America. So for the people that don't know your story, give me like a 2-minute recap of growing up in Iraq and catch us up on it.
Well, I mean, I was born in Iraq, and I was born in Babylon and raised in Baghdad. My first years was under Saddam Hussein, the dictatorship, and then afterwards the U.S. invasion of Iraq happened, and continuous civil war. I mean, my spark for activism was kind of a mix, because after the U.S. intervention in Iraq, we had the first Iraqi elections, and I saw the rise of sectarian politics, and since I was a young boy back then, I was advocating for secular values and just to prevent the rise of terrorist groups like what we have right now, because I was afraid that if one group takes over the other, and that did not obviously go I wanted to be. And I left, so within like the civil war was rising, I lost members of my family, lost my brother, lost my cousin. I was also lost some friends, and I had to leave Iraq in 2009. And actually, a year afterwards, I started like the page that's called Global Secular Humanist Movement that eventually became one of the largest in the world. And I left Iraq and went to country close to Singapore, Malaysia, and I applied for asylum through the UNHCR, the United Nations Committee for Refugees, and I got accepted to come to America.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to have you both on together, because I think it's really interesting, people that come from different places, and as I say on the show all the time, the ideas we talk about here transcend borders, and they transcend ethnicity and nationality and all of those things. So when you were there and when you were growing up there, did you have a political awakening while you were there? Did you realize that you couldn't say some of the things that you wanted to say and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So Singapore, like, you know, when you first when somebody learns that I am from this country, they will say one or two things. The first one is, I heard chewing gum is banned. I heard you can't bring bubble gum into the...
Is that true?
Yes, it is true.
You can't bring chewing gum into Singapore?
It used to be that. They've relaxed it a little, so you can't purchase it now. You can't purchase chewing gum there, and it's for a very kind of silly reason.
Yeah, what could possibly...
Back in the 1980s, you know, Singapore was developing economically, right? But you can develop really fast economically, but the people's mindsets and civility and tragedy of the commons sort of mindset had not developed. So they would litter. You know, you stick your chewing gum on the doors of the trains, and then they get stuck. And so the government was like, we're not going to spend tax dollars cleaning this up. So you can't handle the chewing gum. We're going to take it away. Wow.
So talk about an authoritarian...
It's autocratic, yes.
Really at a very micro level, like how authoritarian the government
is. That's a good example. The second one is, you know, if one of the sort of the best gifts you can get in Singapore for like a tourist to bring home that people usually get is a T-shirt that says Singapore is a fine city, and on it there are all the different fines that you can get. Like you cannot eat on the public, you know, the public train systems, and it's just a country with very strong rule of law and all sorts of rules that you can't do this and you can't do that, and everything under the guise of maintaining social harmony.
Yeah. Now, I assume at some level that probably works, right? At some level, the social harmony.
We have not had, you know, radicalization of our Sunni Muslim population. Not as much as any other country, actually, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's been largely, you know, you have Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims living very harmoniously together. We've not had any incidents. So there is something to be said about the methods of top-down institutionalization of social harmony. The problem is that manifests itself in sedition laws, blasphemy laws. And as recently as last year, it was used to throw a 17-year-old blogger into jail for wounding the feelings of religious people. All he did was say some stuff about Jesus Christ, and at least 20 grown-up adults in Singapore felt offended enough to file a police report, and they threw a 17-year-old into jail.
Right, so we've talked a little bit about what they've done to bloggers in Bangladesh and Singapore, and you've connected me with a Bangladeshi blogger who I'm going to have on soon. These are the people that we need to be caring about more, right? Because these are the people that you guys could have been had you not left.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows, like, whenever one of these folks get killed, or like what happened in Bangladesh, or Raif Badawi in Saudi Arabia get jailed, we know that these guys are the solution. We know that they stand for the same values that we stand for, and we know that they are the best counter. They create the best counter narrative to extremists. And like Raif Badawi, like he's the Sam Harris of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
He's the intellectual who has advocated for great values that in a country that is as extreme as Saudi Arabia, they would have changed the world. Saudi Arabia, that is one of the main exporter of Wahhabi ideology, that killed the Bengali bloggers, that created the Taliban, which a country that has nuclear weapons. So yeah, I mean, we have to. They are our best resource that we should always continue to help them as much as we can and whenever we can.
Yeah. So when you were there and you saw this sort of authoritarianism, when did you realize, all right, if I'm going to express what's in me, I may have to leave?
I sort of realized that in high school, in Singapore, many of the best schools, like the top, you know, in academia, they were religious schools. You know, it's just like a sort of a vestige of the colonial era when, like, the British came. It was a British colony, and you had all the missionaries from France, from Europe. They came to set up schools to educate the locals. And so this became associated with academics, like high academic standards. So I ended up going to, Methodist schools, which were associated with very high academic standards.
Right. Did you grow up Methodist?
Yes, and I did.
Yeah.
So the religious schools are quite a force to reckon with in Singapore, in producing graduates. And I guess I realized that, this is a country that is very self-enforcing in terms of political correctness. If you can't, there's all sorts of rules, and the reason people don't do something or don't litter is because there's a fine waiting to happen.
Yeah.
So the motivation to do something or to not do something is completely extrinsic. So we're all self-policing each other, and I sort of bought into the sort of ideal of the United States, the First Amendment, the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech, because I was always that rebellious, skeptic in my circle, in my religious circle, and school, which is pretty much overlapped at that point. And that's when I realized I need to get out.
Yeah.
I really need to get out if I wanted to broaden my mind and fulfill that.
Yeah, I'm curious, when you hear the phrase self-policing in a place like Singapore, and they're self-policing because of fines and sort of this authoritarian thing, one of the things I've been saying on the show all the time is that we are now self-policing ourselves in America. So it's not coming, we always used to fear the idea that the government is what's going to come in and take away our free speech.
Yeah.
But
Right.
now we're doing it to ourselves, and what's happening
Yes.
in academia, which I want to talk to you guys about in a little bit. But when you hear that, does that make you crazy, knowing from where you came?
Exactly. It's 1984, but people-wise.
Right, it's backwards somehow.
It's backwards of 1984. Yeah. To be honest, before I came to the United States, I had like a very good image of what, like, when I came to America, the people, especially the people who believe in the same values as I am, the secular liberals of the West, would just give me and I would.
But did they at first? Because the movement has changed, right? Something on the left has changed over the last couple of years. So when you moved here, I'm guessing maybe it was a little more welcoming.
It was welcoming, but I thought it would be more welcoming. I didn't know that there was this a huge split. The fact that if anybody can be advocating for same-sex marriage in a Western country, it's totally okay. But the moment you talk about it in a Muslim country, it becomes
you're
Islamophobia.
Racist. Yeah.
And I didn't know about these dynamics, that when you talk about the same values that the American liberals advocate for, when you move it to a universal or another countries, you would immediately be called a racist. And so when I got into that, I started getting attacked left or right over over what I'm saying is that I support same-sex marriage, and they're like, oh, well, that is a form of colonialism. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Because you're saying the same thing for the United States, and I just said that I believe that gays are humans, even in Iraq. I think they are humans. They breathe and they have the same DNA of a human being, so they are a human being.
Really out there stuff, Really,
So radical.
So I don't really think of myself as a radical person. I think that I'm advocating but the moment you just shift it to a different culture, quote unquote, because what I find very difficult here is that because we're minorities, where I come from, I'm the majority. Even though I'm an atheist, I'm a minority all the time.
Right.
But when it comes to color of my skin, I'm the majority. So here in America, there is this concept of the authentic voice when it comes to minorities, is that there are these stereotypes, whether it's from the right or the left, if you are from this specific race, these are the issues that you should care about the most.
In this specific order.
If you are a Mexican, you should care about immigration and so on. And if you are Arab, they expect this image about, okay, he's a young Arab man, so he must hate the West, and he must be very angry against the United States about what Bush did to Iraq, and he must hate capitalism, and he must all this stuff. So if you don't fit into that narrative, you're immediately gonna be attacked as some sort of Uncle Tom or traitor, which is itself racist without them noticing it.
Right, that's what I keep saying. They're actually using real racism because they're not judging you by what's in your mind, they're judging you by what they think of you.
Martin Luther King is rolling as a grave right now, because it's so that's actually one of the most difficult things I found over here, is that how come you don't subscribe to my notions of who you should be?
Yeah.
I'm an individual as you are, and now like we can see it in the U.S. elections, in which I've seen many people on both sides, I would say, especially I would say on the far left, who are like, how can you as a black not support Bernie or something like that? Well, black people have agency, and they may rationally think of supporting one person over the other. Like, you can disagree with them, and that's completely fine. But to say like, why is he as a black person? You don't say that about a white person. You don't say like, I mean, maybe they support Trump, but like,
right. And this is coming again from white people
exactly
on the left.
Who
So
took like a critical race theory from like White Guilt University in California, and they are suddenly now experts of race relations and what the dynamics of the Middle East are.
Right.
And they just like project themselves as being the intellectuals.
So that's really interesting, and because we talk so much about the Middle East and we talk about extremism and Islam and whatever, I see a very specific reason why you get something like that. I'm curious, having left Singapore, believing in secular values and atheism and all that, do you find some of that soft bigotry of low expectations that we talk about?
No, I don't. In fact, I'm probably a beneficiary of high expectations, right? Like that joke that Chris Rock made at the Oscars with the little kids, with the little accountant, and for some reason, the Asian community was really up in arms about that stereotype. Yeah. Even though it's a positive stereotype.
It's a positive stereotype. And so what did you feel when you heard that?
Okay, so I did get into some online fights about this because, again, as Faisal says, because of your race, like seemingly Asian person, you should be finding this thing offensive.
Right.
You shouldn't laugh at it. You should assail and rally against and sort of deny stereotypes, forgetting that this is in the context of humor. And the same thing with what Sacha Baron Cohen said about the little minions, like that really blew, like even Jeremy Lin, the basketballer, got into that.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, I was asking people rhetorically, like what happens to comedy if you just take all stereotypes out of it? You have to be angry at South Park. You have to be angry at, SNL, everybody.
Yeah. I mean, this whole season, did you guys watch South Park this season?
Yeah, it was.
I mean, this whole season, I think it might have been the best season ever.
I know.
They literally, the entire season was dedicated.
He made me watch it.
Well, there you go. So the whole season was dedicated to fighting these exact ideas.
Right, exactly. And the thing about taking offense is, I always ask people, like, who creates the offense? The offense, the person who offended, or the person who feels the offense? Yeah. Who's the one that actually created it? Because does it happen in a vacuum?
Right. So there's a particularly interesting notion with what you're saying, because the stereotype. So when Chris Rock brought out the three, or was it
three little kids?
Yeah, three.
Well, one of them actually had a Jewish name.
Yeah.
So,
right. So
but the Jewish people weren't angry.
Right. So they
at all.
So just for people that didn't see it, so they brought out three Asian kids. One of them had a Jewish name. Yeah. And they were supposed to all be like accountants.
Yeah. From Pricewaterhouse.
Yeah. So they were all supposed to be really bright accountants. Blah blah. But so the stereotype that they're using is a positive stereotype.
It's actually
the implication
a
is, oh, these are educated kids that are going to go on
Asians
and be
tend to be very good at math, and they excel academically.
Right. So when people were upset with you, or when you said I'm okay with the humor in that, the people that were upset, what were they saying? Like, did they feel that that's causing some sort of backlash?
Yeah.
So
they don't like the perpetuating of the model minority, and they think that sets up a standard where now every Asian has to live up to that. Yeah. I think they're reading too much into it. It's just a reflection of stereotypes that have a grain of truth. In the case of Ali G, who made that joke about, he said, this Oscars is all about diversity, but what about them little yellow guys, who have the little dongs? Yeah. And then he paused. Everybody laughed, right? So everybody assumed that he was talking about Asians. Yeah. And then he said, the minions. So the joke was actually on you, because you are the ones who did the stereotyping. Uh-huh. And I don't think they just reacted to that. They were like, Ali G's saying, that Asians have small dongs. And I was just like, well, actually, this is the anatomy of humor. And if you don't know Ali G as a character, and how he's playing off his humor, he's actually saying you're the one who's stereotyping.
Right. So just to be clear, he did something really clever there because he took you one way, made you laugh, and then immediately takes you to the other place. So you're right. It's on you.
It's on you. You're the one who stereotyped.
Yeah.
You laughed and you thought that he meant Asian people.